It was February. The western sunset engulfed the entire cold, winter sky. Its desolate red light was like a layer of an oil painting, giving passers-by shades of different colors. The passers-by were full of smiles. It was the third day of the Lunar New Year, a good time to go shopping at the temple fair. In the small city of Luoqing, there were at least 7 temple fairs going on. Lu Shu, I want to eat hawthorn candy, the ones with a walnut. One girl said, pulling on the sleeve of the young man in front of her. Her hand was pointed towards the small candy cart at the roadside. Through its glass windows, one could see that the hawthorn candies inside were gleaming like crystals. The girl was young and looked about 10 years old. She wore a white down jacket, which was clean and pristine. The 17-year-old teenager named Lu Shu looked over at the cart unwillingly, cleared his throat and said to the girl, Lu Xiaoyu. Didn't I tell you when I bought you the down jacket? If you wanted the down jacket, we would have to spend less, or else I wouldn't have enough to pay for my senior year 3 school fees next semester. Lu Shu, you've changed. Lu Xiaoyu said calmly. Lu Shu's face turned dark. Who did you learn this from? Watch fewer soap operas, will you? He hesitated for a moment, before sighing and walking over to the owner selling the hawthorn candy. Boss, how much do the walnut ones cost? $5. Come on, buy one for your sister, the owner smiled amicably. He knew long ago who actually wanted to eat the candy. $5. So bloody expensive. Lu Shu took out a wrinkled $10 note from his pouch, handed it over to the owner and got $5 back as change. The candy was now Lu Xiaoyu's. One stick of candy consisted of 7 candies. Lu Xiaoyu, upon receiving the stick, said, I'll eat 5 and save 2 for you. Lu Shu smiled and patted Lu Xiaoyu's head, just one will do. At this young age, the girl was only at Lu Shu's waist level. A stretch of Lu Shu's arm would reach her head nicely. Okay. Lu Xiaoyu said. Her pale face and red lips in winter gave her the impression of a beautiful glass doll. At this moment, a few youngsters walked past them, discussing intensely about something peculiar. Did you guys see the news last night? It's about this old man whose soul was seen before he died. This news was deleted eventually. Lu Shu looked at Lu Xiaoyu eating the candy enjoyably while thinking that there were increasing numbers of weird occurrences recently. There was also news that a kid was emitting blue light from his palms, and a big man lifting a 2,000-pound weight with just his hands. It was not clear whether these news were false or not, as they were deleted soon after and the commotion also diminished. There were also some videos, for example, showing a person who would cause the street lights to go off wherever he walked to. These occurrences all seemed extremely weird and supernatural. A video of a woman mysteriously disappearing into thin air. And a video taken by a bystander, who claimed to have seen someone spitting out and sucking in the clouds at the top of a mountain. What was common in all of them was that all these videos eventually disappeared. Lu Shu looked up at the sky and he had a feeling something was about to happen but had no idea what it would be. Did the world really have such mysterious and supernatural occurrences? Having lived for 17 years, these occurrences only started occurring recently. What's wrong? It felt like life was taking a big swing. Let's go watch some acrobatics. Lu Shu took out a pair of tickets from his pouch. There's still 20 minutes. Apparently this year's temple fair specially invited this acrobatics team. There are even acts involving flames. At this point in time, Lu Xiaoyu had finished 6 candies, and satisfactorily passed the stick and its sole remaining candy to Lu Shu. Delicious. Good for nothing. Lu Shu chided. There was indeed a fair amount of work put into this year's acrobatics performance, and it seemed to hint at some elements of magic. The organizers of the temple fair built an elaborate stage, and there were huge crowds below it. Only then did Lu Shu feel the atmosphere of the Lunar New Year. The acrobatics didn't have much uniqueness initially, typical performances such as using heads to smash large vats, juggling knives, and similar acts. Eventually, there was some change towards the end of the performance. A young man came onto the stage, and immediately after the act started, his entire body burst into flames. Lu Shu was taken aback. Heavens, is there really no problem with such a performance? Won't he die? Lu Shu, let me sit on your shoulders to watch the show. Lu Xiaoyu exclaimed. Lu Shu said helplessly, I can't lift you up. Lu Shu seemed rather skinny, and his face unusually pale. It wasn't due to a sudden illness, but it was his innate trait, being born rather frail and weak. Once, he bought supplement pills for a period of time, spending much money and effort, but ultimately, it didn't have any significant effect. Still weak as ever. At the very least, this meant that his weakness was not because of his kidney, it was minimally some sort of consolation for himself. Lu Shu did this to comfort himself. Lu Shu squeezed forward with Lu Xiaoyu as standing closer would have offered them a clearer view. At this moment, the performer on the stage extinguished the flame in the blink of an eye. It seemed as if the flames were totally under his control. Lu Shu only then realized that the rise in price to $20 in this year's temple fair was really worth it, getting to see both acrobatics and magic. The man on the stage had flames engulfing his body momentarily, and in the next moment, it would be gone. The crimson-red flame brought along a small shade of blue, and it was extremely gorgeous. Towards the end, flames erupted from the man's palms and flew towards the audience. However, as the flames were about to reach the audience, they all vanished into thin air. Applause and cheers erupted from the entire venue, and the performer bowed before leaving the stage. One person was silent. The bright and crimson-red flame got the closest to Lu Shu, and when that flame got nearer, Lu Shu felt, momentarily, that his heart had an erratic movement. That feeling. It felt like a reconciliation between two parties after an eternity. What was that? Lu Shu had some questions. This feeling felt so real that he had no doubts about it. Lu Shu, I want to learn this. You bring me to him to learn acrobatics. Lu Xiaoyu urged Lu Shu before running off to the backstage. You are just a little girl, why learn acrobatics? All these acts are their secrets and way of life, why would they teach them to you? Moreover, we don't have the money for the learning fees. Lu Shu said irritably. However, he wanted to see the performer as well, and he wanted him to perform it once more if possible. Lu Shu wanted to know exactly what happened to himself previously. He followed Lu Xiaoyu to the backstage and bumped into 5 men with guns, donned in black. A needle-like object was pierced into the neck of the performer, and within 2 seconds, the performer fell flat on the floor, motionless. The other performers didn't dare to utter a word. The aura of this group of people was too strong. Their bodies hidden beneath the black coats must have been huge and contained apocalyptic strength. Lu Shu was confused. What was happening? This scene was rather wrong. Lu Xiaoyu did not care so much. What gives you the right to do this to him? To Lu Shu, not peeing out of fear by this series of events would be impressive for an ordinary person, but Lu Xiaoyu, this little good-for-nothing, had always been righteous, and seeing her potential master on the floor made her even more unhappy. Lu Shu's face turned green and was tempted to flee with Lu Xiaoyu on the spot. Surprisingly, one of the black-coated guys spoke calmly. This temple fair did not apply for the approval of firefighting emergencies for his act. He went against the safety guidelines for fire safety, and we have to bring him back for investigation. I'd be a fool to believe your crap. Lu Shu absolutely did not believe their words, and even if he did go against safety, it would be handled by the organizers of the temple fair. And which fire safety company uses a tranquilizer dart to knock someone out? There's a problem. A huge problem.
Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please support us. Please support us. Please support us.
Even while staring blankly ahead and thinking of what exactly had happened, Lu Shu continued to hold on to Lu Xiaoyu and was prepared to sprint off together any moment. Even if they were unable to run away from these guys, they could have said that they had done their utmost best. Surprisingly for the group of men dressed in black coats, they did not seem like they desired to complicate things for them, nor did they seem to be the kind of typical antagonists in TV shows, who would kill anyone in their way for no good reasons. These men simply walked off. Only after a short while did Lu Shu regain his composure. Could they really have been government officials? Lu Shu then thought of the supernatural incidents before where all video evidences and witnesses had disappeared. Could this performer be linked to that incident as well? He also pondered as to when had the government came up with these jet black coats as uniforms, which he acknowledged were rather decent looking. If only the men from before had suddenly produced documents that they were from the Secret Service, Lu Shu would have possibly believed in it. And as for the fire safety brigade they had mentioned before, forget it. Coming across this, both Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu had lost all mood to carry on watching the temple fair and just wanted to head back home. Lu Shu hung his head low and seemed to be lost in his thoughts as they left the area. Lu Xiaoyu looked up at Lu Shu and asked, "Hey, Lu Shu, a penny for your thoughts?" "Can't you refer to me as Big Brother for once?" replied Lu Shu with a hint of rage. With a face full of scorn, "That little rascal," Lu Xiaoyu retorted, "are we even related by blood?" Just then, a youth popped out of nowhere in front of Lu Shu and with a huge smile on his face, inquired, "I saw that both of you came from behind the stage. Care to share what exactly happened behind there?" "And just who are you?" Lu Shu asked warily. And with a wide grin, this handsome young man introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Ji Wei, happy to meet you."
Yeah,
"Right, how happy exactly?" Lu Shu responded rudely. Ji Wei almost pissed his pants. Why can't this guy act logically? Just take it that I'm very happy." Just as Ji Wei was about to continue explaining, he realized that the teenager did not even bother about him and had walked off in hand with that cute little girl, skipping as she tagged along. Fine. I won't be so calculative about this." Since Lu Shu did not want to help, Ji Wei decided to go check it out for himself, as there should be many other witnesses, and they would probably not be as difficult to interact with as that punk. After covering some distance, Lu Shu turned back to look at that young man with a raised eyebrow as Lu Xiaoyu calmly stated, "You're not your usual self today, Lu Shu." "Xiaoyu, what would you do if this world had a lot more people who are insolent and arrogant?" questioned Lu Shu. He thought, if that performer was really weird and had a problem, then would that throbbing feeling in my heart I experienced meant that there's something wrong with me as well? "I'll just be even more arrogant than them," said Lu Xiaoyu confidently. After hearing her response, Lu Shu pondered for a moment and, as if he had solved the problem in his mind, replied with a smile, "Your logic is so naive, but it does make sense. Come on, let's go home." Brimming with self-confidence, Lu Xiaoyu proclaimed, "But since you're so weak, I'm sure you can't be that arrogant. Even just 5 minutes of basketball with your friends would make you breathless. But don't worry, I'll be arrogant enough to protect you, and all you have to do is to cook for me."
ha, ha.
With a black face, Lu Shu stated, "Such ridiculous confidence." Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu lived in the 4th district of Luoqing Xingshu Road. This was the place which was said to be the Shui family household, but that was decades ago. Now the 4th district was publicly recognized as the slums, consisting only of one-story-high apartments even in this age of times. Tattered and run down, these structures did not have gas fuel supplied to it, nor does it provide ample warmth, rightfully earning itself the label of slums. Within this city, the 80 square meter rented apartment they lived in cost them $500 a month, excluding water and electricity charges. Purely hoping for the decent compensation he would receive upon the relocation of the entire district, the landlord did not have any plans to sell the apartment. Even with talks of tearing the place down going on since years ago, it still had not been acted on as the residents of this district were rather unreasonable and were hard to deal with. Although many despised and looked down on this place, Lu Shu was somehow rather fond of it due to the fact that every apartment had a courtyard of approximately 10 meters wide in front of it, where you could plant your own vegetables such as garlic, chives and many others, as these costs money to buy outside. Lu Shu was relatively poor as he was an orphan, being abandoned outside an orphanage from a young, tender age. Such was the same for Lu Xiaoyu as well. For most orphans living in these orphanages, they would have to enter society and make a living for themselves if no one offered to adopt them upon reaching the age of 16. This was exactly the case for Lu Shu. Lu Shu had been frail since young, and logically speaking, no family would want to adopt such a frail, sick-looking kid. As for Lu Xiaoyu, she sneaked out on her own accord, and orphanages were not strangers to such behaviors. In these times where orphans were unable to stand the way they live in the orphanage, sneaking out and resorting to stealing, robbery or begging to get by each day were not uncommon. As such, filing police reports about these missing children were too much of a hassle nowadays. The orphanages around were not like those model orphanage depicted in movies, where it was filled with a strong sense of responsibility. After running off, who cared how the child was doing, whether he or she was dead or alive? Lu Shu actually wished to send Lu Xiaoyu back to the orphanage since her qualities were rather decent and was still at a tender age. Surely there would be people willing to accept her. However, every time he tried to send her back, she sneaked back out again regardless. Time after time, Lu Shu had gotten used to her being around all the time. Compared to the kids around her age, Lu Xiaoyu had matured earlier and was considered somewhat abnormal, although Lu Shu was not exactly very normal himself. It did not show usually, but today's interaction with Ji Wei was just one of the many examples. Their rented apartment was the innermost one out of the whole stretch of buildings. On their way back home, they spotted the neighboring middle-aged lady brewing oriental medicine. Lu Shu had observed that there was an elderly within the house, suffering from an illness all year round, and that this lady was the elder's daughter-in-law. This illness seemed to be hereditary, tortuously taking away the son's life even before the elderly. You could consider this daughter-in-law to be quite filial, always caring for the old man all these years. Auntie Lim, despite only looking 40-something, had quite a few wrinkles all over her face. But after everything, Lu Shu could tell from her features and outlines that she was rather attractive in her prime, younger days. It was an uncommon trait in today's society for someone to be willing to go so far as to single-handedly take care of her husband's father. "Good evening, Auntie Lim," Lu Shu greeted with a smile. "Shu, Xiaoyu, you're back," smiling as well as she replied. As Lu Shu was about to bring Lu Xiaoyu back home, she abruptly bent over and curiously stared at the medicinal herbs brewing over the stove. "Auntie Lim, can I have some?" Auntie Lim chuckled. "This is medicine, Xiaoyu." Lu Xiaoyu thought for a moment, then just one mouth. With disapproval written all over Lu Shu's face, "Shu, this is medicine for others, not something for you to try out." At this age where a person's pride starts to build, this was especially embarrassing for Lu Shu. Having this gluttonous rascal tagging along with him was simply disgraceful. That kind of medicine does not taste nice at all, okay?
Aww.
Lu Xiaoyu reluctantly continued on her path home, constantly looking back towards the pot of medicine. Obviously, she had not given up on the thought of tasting it. From the house directly behind Auntie Lim, faint sounds of coughing could be heard as the elderly man lamented, "How nice it is to be young." With a smile, Auntie Lim agreed,
Yeah.
"It's nice being young." Lu Xiaoyu stopped turning back to look at the pot of medicine but at Lu Shu with her big, pearly eyes. Lu Shu, I want to eat some bread, some braised beef bread.
Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please support us. Please support us. Please support us.
What do you mean you want to eat some bread? I'll cook noodles for you. Lu Shu was reluctant. In order to buy bread for Lu Xiaoyu, he would have to brave the cold weather and walk across 2 streets to reach the 24/7 convenience store. The noodles you cook for me are always tasteless. I'm not eating that. Go get me some bread. Lu Xiaoyu was not very pleased. Nope, not going, said Lu Shu as he was about to change out of his shoes. Then how about you break that open and let me eat that walnut hanging from your neck, suggested Lu Xiaoyu with a sparkle in her eyes. Like hell I'm doing that, can we stop harping over this? Lu Shu felt irritated as they had conversed over this matter. That trinket hanging around Lu Shu's neck was not a walnut at all. It only looked like one due to the ridges covering it, a slight black discoloration as well as its oddly round shape. This ordinary-looking trinket was abandoned together with Lu Shu outside of the orphanage. Although Lu Shu had always claimed that the caretakers in the orphanage were not exactly the most responsible, he had to admit that they did have quite upright morals. If not, this trinket would have been long gone. It may seem like just another useless object to Lu Shu, but it held a certain level of significance and a form of hope in his heart. What if? Just what if his biological parents were to search for him by identifying this pendant? Would having it on him not be the best evidence as proof of his origins? Even though he did not fully comprehend the concept of parents, Lu Shu had single-handedly gotten by pretty well throughout these years. Initially, when couples came along to the orphanage for adoption, Lu Shu would always look forward to finally being able to understand what parents really meant when the headmaster brought him up to meet these couples. However, what little hope he had would disappear in a puff of smoke whenever the former despised his frail, sickly looks. Lu Shu would occasionally think to himself that he personally did not really need these parents at all. But whenever he was just about to dispose of that pendant, he would always feel reluctant and could not bring himself to do it. I'll say it one more time, this is not something for you to eat, Lu Shu declared rudely. Not wishing to back down, Lu Xiaoyu argued, it's just a walnut, what's this compared to the old man's medicine? Lu Shu was stunned at that very moment, her reasoning and logic made so much sense. Lu Shu, you've changed, you weren't like this before. Lu Xiaoyu calmly continued, just last year you even helped me with. With dissatisfaction written all over his face, Lu Shu replied, hey, Lu Xiaoyu, enough of this. If you continue to watch those romantic soap operas, I'm telling you, I will smash the television. Then get ready to pay the landlord $800, Lu Xiaoyu responded with composure and an air of coolness. Fine, I'll go get you that bread, as Lu Shu turned around and left the apartment. The winter in Luoqing was indeed rather chilly as Lu Shu tightened up his collar whilst standing outside his front door. All of a sudden, he felt a certain moisture on the top of his eyelids. He looked up and wondered when did these fine, delicate snowflakes start falling from the sky. The elegant, gently falling snowflakes which descended upon the ground seemed like fine hairs, coating the ground, rooftops and Lu Shu himself. How did his relationship with Lu Xiaoyu turn out so well? Lu Shu pondered as he stood outside admiring the falling snowflakes, not really sure of the answer. Maybe it was when he was having a fever at 14 years old in the orphanage and Lu Xiaoyu offered him a glass of warm water? Or maybe because Lu Xiaoyu was always there to scream and notify the headmaster whenever he was being bullied in the orphanage? Or was it because they both had no one to depend on and only had each other? Or actually, was it due to Lu Xiaoyu's unfounded trust and reliance on him which caused him to emulate a certain form of responsibility towards her?
Ah.
Who cares? Lu Shu laughed to himself, since he did not have any parents or relatives, what harm could having a little sister bring about anyway? Even though this little sister was always bugging and irritating him. The day lasted shorter during the winter, and since it was the third day of the new year, the streets were mostly empty, apart from the occasional passing delivery van. I guess the lives of others were not exactly very easy if they had to perform delivery work during the new year. There wasn't a reason, but Lu Shu suddenly recalled today's incident again where the acrobatic performer was taken away. Could that performer be the fabled person who wielded supernatural power which everyone on the net was discussing? Could sorcerers really exist? Why did such matters feel like an illusion in the past, but this year, it suddenly seemed to pop up, rushing into everyone's lives? There was another person today who left a huge impression on Lu Shu, which was none other than that youth called Shi Wei whom he met while leaving the backstage area. Lu Shu was lost in his thoughts of whether those people could have actually existed, which would make the world a whole lot more exciting. At that moment, a sound-shattering gust was hurled towards Lu Shu's direction. Due to the lights from the two huge headlights in the background, one could see the snow splendidly flutter in an unnatural way. Lu Shu turned back instinctively towards the bright lights coming from behind, blinding him such that he felt dizzy. Even in this state, he was still able to make out that the source of lights was from a huge delivery van. It sped towards him like a roaring beast. The shrieks of the brakes slamming against the wheels and the screeches of the skidding wheels resonated with each other. But this beast had lost all control. Time seemed to pause momentarily as the vehicle skidded across, with the atmosphere distorted with pressure and tension. And on this dark, silent night, Lu Shu was hit by this humongous beast. His contorted, mangled body laid across the snowy background as warmth welled up within him. Lu Shu suddenly remembered the saying that just moments before death, one would fondly relive their entire life's memories. Lu Shu shut his eyes in an attempt to embrace this opportunity to recall the looks of his parents who abandoned him outside of the orphanage, but to no avail. He felt his life slowly fading away and finally coming to an end, just like every other wonderful thing on earth. In that instant, the pendant on top of his chest suddenly crumbled. No, the only thing which crumbled to fine dust was the solid, rigid outer shell which Lu Xiaoyu once tried to smash open using a hammer. It finally revealed what was within, a tiny, mysterious object which looked a little like an almond but also somewhat like a star. The star-like object then entered his body and infused within him. Lu Shu felt its power coursing through his veins throughout his body, and upon releasing its last surge of warmth, it vanished into his senses. The power surging within Lu Shu's heart was as strong as a tailwind blowing throughout the entire Pacific Ocean. Thump! 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 With strong, pounding heartbeats, a white light was burning brightly from within his heart. Indeed, another flame of life was born from his once extinguished life force. This sort of delight had finally greeted Lu Shu in such a long time, bringing him a certain feeling of joy and comfort. This seemingly inextinguishable flame was burning brilliantly, and it felt like it was a gift from heaven, especially for Lu Shu himself. Time resumed and Lu Shu struck the floor with a loud thud, seemingly lifeless. The delivery man got off his vehicle and stared at Lu Shu, who was sprawled on the ground, in disbelief and regret. If only he had driven more carefully and less recklessly, things would not have turned out like this. The driver slowly inched towards the lifeless body on the road, without any concern for his vehicle since it was fully insured. Thousands of reparations cost could be covered, but compared to the boy's priceless life, it was considered negligible. All of a sudden, the boy's body jerked and the driver, filled with surprise and suspicion, quickly made his way over. Even before he got close enough, Lu Shu rose and stood up with blood all over his face. You've gotten yourself into some deep. Shh! *T now.
Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please support us. Please support us. Please support us.
Lu Shu had no clue how he survived that without any pain or discomfort. But he could tell that the blood stains, the palpitating heat waves, and the new tree-like symbol on his palm were all real. It felt like something special had happened, but Lu Shu was not sure. The strange happenings on the news had been on his mind the whole day, and he even started to yearn for such powers. At that moment, it seemed like there were signs telling him that he was different from the rest. His mind was filled with a myriad of emotions, partly due to the accident with the huge truck of which its shock was still lingering. Another part of it was some sort of excitement. Who did not desire to be special? If all 17-year-olds were given a choice to obtain unimaginable powers, probably 90% of them would choose to do so. The last part was his anger at the driver. Although he was fine, the fact that he was walking on the sidewalk and getting knocked over by a driver out of the blue was so uncalled for. He just wanted to buy some bread and cup noodles for Lu Xiaoyu during his free time but got hit by a truck. Where's the justice in this? Would a simple monetary compensation make up for this? Maybe not. He had, in reality, just been hit head-on. But there was a problem. Could the injuries on his body be proven? After the wave of heat had suddenly seared through his body, the injuries had all disappeared and his body felt normal. Lu Shu was confident that this was what just happened. If the hospital deemed that he was totally fine, would he still be able to receive any compensation? And there was the situation with that performer in broad daylight being put to sleep and brought away in front of his eyes. If the hospital found out about his body's abnormality, would he be taken away as well? At this point in time, Lu Shu was worried about the events that could follow if he was captured, and also afraid that Lu Xiaoyu would have no one to take care of her. If he had not witnessed the incident at the temple fair, he might have gone to the hospital. Lu Shu could have claimed a huge sum of money from the driver's insurance and lead a comfortable life from then on, but he decided to back out. Since the usual procedure was not possible, maybe a more unorthodox one would work. You've gotten yourself into some deep *T. Lu Shu slowly helped himself back onto his feet. The driver was shocked to see Lu Shu standing even with his bloodied face. He wanted to run away upon witnessing this strange sight. Is that car borrowed or personal? Before Lu Shu could finish his sentence, the driver shrieked in fear and ran, leaving his truck behind. Lu Shu stood there, speechless. Am I that? He wiped off the blood on his face and stared blankly at the driver running off. How am I going to get my compensation now? Lu Shu turned around and left. The scene of the captured circus performer was still lingering in his head. Who knew if those men in black might appear soon? He had thought about heading straight home but decided to continue his trip to the supermarket as it was the third night of the Lunar New Year and the only supermarket in business was Zhang Donglai's supermarket. 2 braised beef cup noodles please. Lu Shu, with his face still covered in blood, handed over a $5 note which incited suspicious stares from Zhang Donglai, the middle-aged supermarket owner. Lu Shu grabbed 2 braised beef cup noodles from the shelf and left immediately, knowing that his appearance was too terrifying. Under the snowy night skies, the dim street lights illuminated passing snowflakes. This familiar scene looked just like in the movies. Walking on a thin layer of snow, Lu Shu left a long, quiet trail with his footprints, accompanied by the contrast of white snow and black floors, dim yellow streetlights, and the endlessly dark skyline. What an unexpected but yet harmonious scenery it was. He looked back and thought about everything that had just happened. It felt like something in his life was never going to be the same. Lu Shu! What happened to you? Lu Xiaoyu exclaimed upon seeing his return. The bloodstains on his body were too eye-catching. Even on his way home, 2 passers-by ran upon the sight of him. Don't worry, I got hit by a truck but I'm fine, Lu Shu explained. Lu Xiaoyu had always treated Lu Shu like he was a dimwit. So much blood and you call that fine? So did you hit the truck and the blood came from the truck? Lu Shu rolled his eyes, what do you mean by me hitting the truck? Can you speak logically? I'm going to bathe, you cook the cup noodles yourself. Cook me one too. He gave up trying to explain the situation to Lu Xiaoyu because the whole event was not something one could even make sense of. As Lu Shu stood under the hot shower, he was checking if there were any visible scars or marks on his body through the now slightly foggy mirror. There's no visible change, Lu Shu whispered to himself. His body was almost exactly the same as before. If not for the tree-like symbol on his palm, he might have thought all that was just a dream. Scrutinizing the albescent tree symbol, a new world had suddenly opened up inside his mind. Menu. Below the menu were 3 options: shop, lottery, records. Inside his mind, Lu Shu opened up the shop option, only to see a range of items but only one was lit up while the rest was a blur. The only available item was a strange one. Celestial fruit, cost 1,000. At the bottom of the shop displayed another number, balance, 697. Lu Shu was puzzled. What was the 697 about, and what currency was the shop using? Why did he even have an account balance? At the moment, the 697 suddenly changed and increased to 701. Lu Shu recalled that the menu had a records option and immediately went to take a look. A bunch of details was shown inside. From Zhang Donglai's distress, plus 131, plus 27, plus 5, plus 1, plus 1. This looks like a continuous update, but what is Zhang Donglai distressed about? Isn't he the fat owner of that supermarket? Is it possible that my bloodied face scared him and his distress became my income? Isn't this the legendary Demon King who becomes stronger with others increasing distress? The only difference is that the Demon King becomes stronger directly, but I have to buy items in order to level up?
Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please support us. Please support us. Please support us.
Lu Shu continued scrolling. 10 points from Chu Yang and 10 points from Li Lin. Those 2 must have been the 2 passers-by he met just now. And a few hundred points from Zhang Xuanhua. Could he be the driver who hit him? If not, who else could have contributed so much distress points? Lu Shu had started to understand what was going on. 100 points from Lu Xiaoyu. He must have scared her earlier on. As Lu Shu scrolled the page back to the top, a new update came, from Jiwei's distress, plus 1 point. Jiwei was that teenager from the afternoon, but Lu Shu had only been slightly rude to him. The fact that he was still in distress and bearing that grudge for such a long time made Lu Shu frown. As it appeared, not only did instilling fear in others gave him income. It worked as long as any form of distress was caused, even hatred could give him points. Lu Shu let out a sigh of relief. Initially, he thought that he had to dress up as a ghost to scare others, but not anymore. If he had to do that, some righteous person might just strike him down, and that would be terrible. Having obtained this demon-like power, it was bound for a demon-slaying hero to appear soon. As for causing resentment, Lu Shu was capable of that. Having understood how the source of his income worked, Lu Shu opened up that last lottery option only to see a wheel, needle arrows and a button with 100 points each try written next to it. Lu Shu was excited since he could afford to try the lottery. Tapping the button, the wheel started spinning, and the moment he shouted stop, the wheel slowed down. Thank you for participating. Damn, Lu Shu almost knocked into the basin. You're a magical system. How can there be such a terrible option on the wheel? How can this work? What's the point in spinning this damn wheel? His total of 701 distress points had just been set back by 100, but he did not want to stop. After all, this lottery was the only thing he could do with this new system.
Ah.
Whatever, I'll try again. The wheel started spinning. Thank you for participating. Thank you for participating. Thank you for participating. What your asterisk T am I participating in? Lu Shu tried another 5 times, and got another 5 participation notifications. Am I so unlucky? Can someone tell me what's the chances of getting this damned result? Lu Shu had no idea what other things he could have gotten as he had only seen that one result. What a scam! For the last time, the wheel started spinning once again and Lu Shu shouted stop without hesitation. As the wheel stopped, Lu Shu was surprised to see the needle arrow pointing to a blur spot and not the participating one. The blur slowly dissipated and revealed a plum-like, red and long fruit. A refresher fruit has been added to your inventory. You can retrieve items from your inventory anytime you wish. Retrieve. A refresher fruit appeared instantaneously in Lu Shu's palms. The delectable-looking fruit was said to have an effect of cleansing the body. To eat or not to eat? Without hesitation, Lu Shu put the fruit into his mouth as it turned into a wave of heat which coursed through his body. In the winter, the room temperature was rather low and even after a bath, Lu Shu was still felt cold. But eating the fruit had suddenly removed any feeling of coldness, only to feel a pulsating heat deep within his body and drops of sweat started forming soon after. This feeling. It felt like his whole body had been purged completely, amazing. Lu Shu, who had always been unhealthy and prone to sickness, felt like his body's weaknesses had been lifted, as though the fruit had released all the burdens shackled to his body. Although Lu Shu did not turn into those legendary strong men, the change in his body was significant enough to make him feel over the rainbow. In school, Lu Shu's physical education teacher would always let him sit out of runs and exercises and even during ball games, as he was too embarrassed to participate. His lacking and scrawny looks also affected his confidence whenever he talked to the girls in his class. As Lu Xiaoyu had always commented, what girls were there to attract with such a weak body? Lu Shu once again checked his account balance, left with 1 point. The points came quickly but were also depleted quickly. He then checked the records again, a new update, 1 point from Xi Wei's distress. His grudge. Lu Shu thought that the system was quite amazing to know who was feeling distressed because of him. Lu Shu, come out and eat your noodles. Lu Xiaoyu shouted. Lu Shu replied instinctively, remember to add some green onions for me. They had grown some green onions in their garden and it was a waste not to eat them. In the records, from Lu Xiaoyu's distress, +10, +10, +10. Lu Shu took a deep cold breath. A normal person would have gone out to pacify the angry girl but Lu Shu was not normal. Put some parsley too. Lu Shu shouted. +10, +10, +10. Lu Shu continued annoying her, thinking that this cheeky Lu Xiaoyu would be able to contribute to half of his daily distress points. Thinking about it, Lu Shu cheerfully went out to eat his noodles and seeing Lu Xiaoyu's stern-looking face made him even happier. Lu Shu, you used to be the one who cooked noodles for me. Lu Xiaoyu complained with a straight face. No issues, from now onwards you will cook. As he finished his sentence, Lu Shu noticed that another 20 points had been added and smiled uncontrollably. But he could not always bully this kid. After all, in this entire world, they had only each other to rely on. The snow was getting worse and the whole world seemed to have turned white as the seemingly lonely snowflakes slowly drifted down. That's right. They had only each other in this world. Lu Shu, shall we build a snowman later? Lu Xiaoyu asked. Sure, Lu Shu replied with a smile, what kind of snowman? Let's talk about that later, I'm still deciding. Lu Xiaoyu continued eating her noodles. She had chosen to leave the orphanage and be with Lu Shu not because Lu Shu treated her well, but because she felt like family to him. It was as simple as that. Family. In reality, this word felt so distant to the two of them. In the end, they did not manage to build any decent-looking snowman. The two of them had no talent in this area compared to others who always seemed to be able to build really good ones. Finally, within their courtyard sat two snowmen, a small one and a big one. Besides their man-like silhouettes, their features and details were a mess. The two lonely snowmen stood tightly beside each other in this cold, dark world.
Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please like and subscribe our channel. Please support us. Please support us. Please support us.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to the heavens to tell us things that we beg to know. Like what did the song mean?